I mean, I'd say success for me is a combination of like alignment and independence. So it's trying to align absolutely everything where you have a work-life balance, where you have money to be able to survive, where you have disposable income, where you also can afford to invest in your business.
He started with $700 and a dining room table, and today his floral designs have transformed royal weddings, A-list celebrity events, and fashion shows for Dior and Valentino. This is luxury entrepreneurship at the highest level. Welcome back to The Root of All Success. I am your host, the real Jason Duncan, and this is episode number 339. My guest is Larry Walshe. He's an award-winning floral designer and the founder of Larry Walshe Studios with locations in London, New York, Lake Como, and the south of France. He built his business the old-fashioned way. He sent a lot of cold emails, a lot of handwritten letters, and as we all know, at the beginning, you have to put in that relentless hustle, and he certainly did that. Now, he serves royal households. He designs events for clients like Rihanna, Adele, Benedict Cumberbatch, and then he creates installations for fashion houses like Dior and Valentino and Elie Saab. And during the pandemic, he also founded Bloom, which was the UK's first 100% plastic-free florist service, proving that sustainability and luxury can coexist. So, Larry, welcome to The Root of All Success.
Good to be here.
Well, you went from, as I said in the opening, $700 and a dining room table to designing events for royals and A-list celebrities. I mean, when did you realize that you weren't just building a florist business, but you were building something much bigger than that?
I think probably around the time that I transitioned from doing floristry into overall event design. I'd originally studied as an interior designer, and I wasn't necessarily sure how that creative path was necessarily going to merge all of those disciplines and kind of skills that I had together. But I think at the time that I kind of moved from a place of looking at one element that factors part of that visual journey into looking at all of the elements, that really took the business from one level to where it now sits today.
Yeah, when you go from paying attention to just the details of doing it to moving back to the big picture, like, holy crap, I'm putting together this big event. That's when it becomes something bigger.
And actually kind of taking a step back and ultimately in the front end side of essentially what is structuring your business in a better way so that you're not actually stifling creativity, but you're allowing even more space for it.
Well, before the royal households and all the celebrity clients, you were cold emailing venues and you were handwriting letters to planners.
Still do.
So
I still do. I literally am like, hi, my name's Larry. And people are like, I know who you are. And I'm kind of like, okay, well, I'm just going to pretend you don't because I didn't know you until 2 minutes ago.
So what kept you going when most of those early outreach attempts went unanswered? Because we know most of them didn't answer you. I mean, right? I mean, or am I wrong about that?
I am sales through and through. So at the same time as being that creative, I sit in a space where actually I utilize both sides of my brain. I do have a logistical side as well that I can kick into. Equally, I love to kind of engage the creative side. But sales is something I put myself into years ago before I started running my own business, before I actually knew what it was I wanted to do. I've Goldilocks a little bit of every single job possible. I've been a real estate agent. I've worked in retail. I've jumped around. And for me, it's the thrill of the chase. It's the challenge. It's converting that client. It's getting somebody to a place where you provide so much trust and alignment that they want to invest in you.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that this right and left brain coexisting in one place. I tend to think that I myself am the same way. I wonder how many entrepreneurs, if we kind of test everybody, I wonder if most of them are like that, at least the successful ones anyway. What do you think?
I think so. I think there has to be a fundamental of, especially if you're working in creative industries, if you're to create something which is self-sustaining and robust, you need to be able to engage both of those because the financials are important, because the structure that you put into the business is important. It's vital. And as I say, it's something that I've learned ultimately doesn't stifle creativity. It allows space for it.
Now, speaking of creativity, floral design, of course, is an art, but scaling the business into a global business, that of course, that's a different skill. And we've got this right and left brains we talked about. When do you think that the entrepreneur in you started to take over from the artist, or did it?
I think it's more about alignment. I think it's having something which allows you to do both of those things together in tandem, because it's not one necessarily taking over from the other. It's understanding that those two things have to marry together. It's a relationship. And you're going on this journey together. And equally, for example, if you're in a partnership with somebody, a successful one, you're hopefully bringing something good to the table from one person and from somebody else. Those two things together are then marrying and balancing you in that journey. There's times where the creativity is important. That's important for the product that I'm ultimately selling. But then the business side of that, the other side of my brain that actually thinks about the operational impact, the team that I'm building, the amount of money I'm spending on warehousing and infrastructure and all of those things, those are totally vital, because I could be doing the most beautiful work in the world, but if I'm not actually making any money, I remember somebody at the very beginning telling me, you can be the busiest person in the world making no money. And I swear I've held on to that little saying for the entire time that I've run my own company, because I'm kind of like, it's true, especially when you start something, you're seeing other people doing work that you want to be doing. You're seeing your competitors winning work that you might not be winning, working on projects that you aren't being even like asked to bid for. But instead of worrying about what they're doing, you need to literally just be focusing in on kind of going, okay, here's the product that I'm providing, here's the service I'm providing, and being consistent. You don't know how much money they're actually truly making when they do that job. They could be taking the job, making no money on it just to win the piece of business, but that's not a sustainable way to operate.
Indeed. And too many entrepreneurs do that for too long
Yeah,
and end up going out of business. You
totally.
know, in my research about you, I found out that in 2018, you had a life-changing car accident. How did that experience reshape your priorities, both personally and professionally?
I think when you actually, I think you sit and you realize what is actually important. And I think that thing actually comes down to say like how one would almost start defining success. And it's also, it's that space of realizing that say work-life balance is incredibly important. How do you get to a space where that can be a reality? And ultimately then for how can you start defining success? And for me, that's a space where creativity, integrity, the commercial success of a bit of the business, and also my personal life sit in harmony.
You know, now you've got locations in four cities: London, New York, Lake Como, and south of France. That's a that's a pretty bold expansion strategy. So what was the hardest part of taking this luxury brand international and needing to maintain quality?
Two things. So, one, the actual compliance issues and things that sit behind different countries and the different ways of working, because you have very, very different cultures in every single one of those settings. And equally, then building a team that works across a wide breadth of time zones, when I constantly can't be in one place at any one particular time. So I'm dotting between all of them, but being able to find a team that understands the dynamic that you're trying to create and instilling a company ethos that can exist without you having to sit there and say micromanage them.
Yeah. I wouldn't have I thought about some of those details, but yeah, working internationally, there's just regulation issues. Besides just maintaining the quality, you've got to deal with
Boring
all
but
these
true, but
stupid
like that's one
laws.
of the biggest barriers to entry is simply overcoming those compliance issues and realizing as well that you have those cultural differences, and within those things you have a lot of bureaucracy, you have a lot of paperwork that certain places like Italy love to do. They love paperwork. The US, a totally different way of looking at everything. You have sales tax, which we don't have in Europe. And so it's different nuances that once you understand what those are, they're all overcomable. But it is like it's like starting four companies from scratch, because even though it's the same product or the same overall thing, you're starting from the ground up each and every time. And actually, the south of France was the most recent one that we added to our bow. And I looked back and I was like, the things I went through in my 20s to start this business, I was like, my goodness, I'm starting all over again. I'm not sure I have the strength for this one more time. And of course, you do, because you love what you do. But I'm like, I'm done. No, I'm not adding any more like region things to this now, because actually I'm good.
There's not going to be a Larry Walshe studio in Nashville. Is that what you're saying?
No. I proved the concept. I can come to Nashville because I have an American company and I do travel the US. I'm very happy to come on the road with you. Not a problem at all, but I will not be having yet another team and yet another building.
You work with some of the most demanding clients in the world. You got royals, you got celebrities, you got fashion houses. So what's a moment?
I really knew how to pick it, didn't I? Let's go for the easy goal.
So what's a moment when a client pushed you to your limit, and then how did you handle that?
I had the worst one of my entire working career last summer. And how did I handle it? I ran around the back of the building, I sat on the floor and I cried. They actually broke me. And it took a lot because I'm pretty resilient. But I think with each and every person, what I find interesting a bit, and say the salesman listening to this, or salespeople will understand this. It's the thrill of the chase that you have in converting the client is equally the same in guiding them through that process. I like the challenging clients because the thrill for me is getting to the other end of that, getting to the end of the sale. First of all, so from a financial perspective, I want to know that I have maximized and optimized everything that was available. I don't want to walk away feeling like I left anything on the table. But at the same time, I'm going to be providing an excellent service that shows a brilliant return on investment and a value proposition. But then in that client journey, I want them to come out having the best experience. So if you're super easy, and all I have to do is the steps that I know I can do anyway, the service that I've designed for the last 11 years that I'm particularly good at, well, that's lovely, but it's not exactly a challenge to me. So actually to have somebody who's a little bit more demanding, or who insists I have to work on a particular time zone or under particular time constraints or something like that, as much as it's actually really annoying because it is more stressful to do it, it's also the reward at the end for me as that salesperson for not only converting it, but ensuring client satisfaction. That's the bit that then sticks with you. You feel like you really accomplished something.
The luxury event industry often gets a lot of criticism for waste, but you launched Bloom as a 100% plastic-free florist during the pandemic. What made you believe sustainability could work in a market that's built on extravagance?
Well, I think first and foremost, because as I just said, picking the easy option isn't that satisfying. So I sat there and I was like, okay, great. So what would actually be a challenge? And we sat there in the middle of the lockdown where we couldn't do anything. So places of worship were closed, weddings were banned. There was nothing myself and my team could do. And I was like, well, I'm not just going to sit around and pay people to do nothing. So let's come up with a new challenge. And we used to retail some bouquets, but we never took it seriously. It was for clients, for example, that already were working with us that wanted to send something to somebody else. So I said, okay, well, let's do retail. And I genuinely thought that when I said sustainability, I was going to wrap things in brown paper. I'd do like 2 new pages of a website and boom, poof, it was all going to be ready and done. And then I entered a rabbit hole of sustainability, which was like a 6-month journey that I'm not going to lie. At certain points, I was like, I'm ready to come out now. Like, I'm ready to come out. It was so much more involved than I ever thought it would be. And actually, it was a blessing working in that time where I had nothing but time to dedicate to learning. That was such a blessing because I wouldn't be able to go on that journey now. But what I wanted to do in that space was provide a meaningful response to an option that would produce less wasteful packaging, less packaging that hasn't been well considered, that actually is harmful, and also trying to debunk some of the greenwashing that I was learning existed I didn't understand that 70% of, for example, what we read actually isn't believed by consumers. I wasn't aware that things like biodegradable is not actually really a term for something that's necessarily beneficial. You hear that, especially from my generation, you hear that, you see it on the box packaging, and you're like, oh, goody, I've just made a good choice. Well, the reality is actually you haven't necessarily. Biodegradable, for example, is just something that goes from one particle size to another. Now, that could be plastic, a plastic to a microplastic. It's not actually good, but you put it on the side of the box and it sounds great. So in doing that, I went into that rabbit hole of going, okay, let me debunk this. Let me genuinely come back with a meaningful response so that the adhesives that go onto all of the stickers and everything else, they're not made with petroleum. And I mean, I was going down a little rabbit hole where I was like, oh, come on. I was like, are you telling me there's oil or petroleum or plastic or something in this? I was like, give me a break. But I was like, I then ultimately managed to realize a product that still has packaging, but at least every single bit of that can be put into the compost or into the recycling without having to think about it. You're not having to pull this bit off, or the bit that has the text on, that's not good for you. You can't actually do anything with that. I wanted it to be easy. It arrives, you take it away. The things you don't want to use again, you can get rid of there. And genuinely, they're going back into the system to be wholly reused.
You've called your studio family run. So how do you maintain that culture when you're operating across 3 countries or 4 countries and managing multi-million-dollar events?
I think for the people that now come into the business, I don't want to say it's treated like a family, because actually I remember making a shift from what felt like mom and pop to a sustainable, robust, structured business some years ago. And I remember hearing, and I don't know if it was just for mindset that it was probably most beneficial for me, but I remember somebody saying, actually, people that say, oh, our business is like a family, it's actually kind of toxic. And so I was like, okay, actually, I need to be really, really mindful of this. It's family run essentially because it was started from scratch. And then my partner came into the business. And then from there, like a number of our relatives and things have formed a core part of that business. But then as it's expanded, of course, external people have come into the team. I now try and make sure that there's a culture where my team understand their contribution and what that contribution means to us and to our clients, that they feel valued and that they're heard in that space. And everybody has the availability to message me at any time to ask me whatever it is that they want to ask, whether that's an HR issue or that's something creative that they want to talk about. I try and make myself very much open and available so that there's a very, very respectful culture between all of us. And it tries to harness, I guess, the benefits that everybody can bring to the table and actually really work as a collaborative cross-pollinatory system.
Yeah. I'm really happy to hear you talk about how important culture is. I believe that I watch these shows on things like CNBC, where it's The Profit. I know it's not running anymore, but I used to love Marcus Lemonis is awesome. I loved watching that show. But what struck me in watching that show and others like it, like Hotel Rescue and Bar Rescue, is how absolutely reprehensibly these owners treat their employees. And I wonder, as a former employee, I could never be an employee again, but as a former employee looking back, going, I would have never put up with that. I would have walked out the first time they ever spoke to me that way. Why do you think people put up with that? I know people like you and me, we run our companies different. Whether we refer to it as family or not, obviously there is some toxicity around that. I understand, but the way we run companies is very different than what others. Why do employees put up with that crap when they don't? I guess they really shouldn't have to.
Well, I actually always said that. There was a number of people that over the years have like come into the business, especially say freelancers or people who've worked for somebody else. They would come in with a space and they went into their first or previous role, young, innocent, unjaded, ready to go at it. They'd work all night, work all day, no sleep, all the things. And then they come to me and they already knew better. They were like, no, I'm not going to put up with that now. I'm not going to be treated like that now. And I was like, why can't I ever get the innocent ones? But I think if you are I think it depends on the kind of industries you're in and things, but especially hospitality, I think people just take advantage. People take advantage of the fact you've got a lot of people coming in that are new, young, or unexperienced, learning to cut their teeth at the bottom and start their way up. And I think also, I think there's a sense of some of the older generations going, that's what they went through. Therefore, feeling that that is the life lesson that needs to be learned. That's the learned experience that needs to be had in order to come out the other side of it. And I think now we're actually realizing as a generation that that's not the case. That sometimes it goes slightly off topic, but even like the way certain people were raised as children and things, some of that behavior just isn't okay. And actually, no, you wouldn't put up with it now, but we've all evolved into a different space. I wouldn't expect people to have to, because actually you don't need to suffer through that moment in order to learn this lesson. I also don't feel like people can go into a space where they walk into their first job and have expectations of X, Y, and Z just being provided to them. I think there's a happy medium. You do still need to, in my opinion, cut your teeth, learn your craft. And if you're learning your craft, you start at the bottom and you do that. But do I believe that you should still be treated with respect and paid fairly and, be in good working conditions? Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, we're going to get back to Larry in just a moment. But first, chances are that there's someone who's come to mind while you've been listening to this conversation that he and I have been having. And I want you to take a moment at the end of this episode and forward it to them. Like, just hit the share button on whether you're watching this on YouTube, you're on Spotify, you're on Apple Podcasts. Just hit that little share button, send it over and say, hey, I think you ought to listen to this, because this right idea at the right time can spark breakthroughs for different people. And what we're talking about today might be that breakthrough, that spark of an idea, and you might be the one who delivers it. Now, a word from today's sponsor. I want to ask you, are you ready to take control of your business cash flow? Are you ready to create your own private source of funding for your business and for your life expenses? Are you ready to transform the way that you build wealth? Well, I want you to imagine a proven strategy that's designed for entrepreneurs that lets you access capital when you need it, without banks, thank God, without gatekeepers, without tedious applications. This type of approach lets your money grow every year. It gives you liquidity for investments and expansion, and it can protect your savings from market shocks. You set your own terms for borrowing. You set your own terms for repayment. You can maximize what you keep and keep your business moving forward with confidence. Savvy entrepreneurs all around the country are unlocking freedom with this method that I'm talking about. It's called Bank on Yourself. And if you want to learn how you can bank on yourself, go to therealjasonduncan.com/bank on yourself, and you can book a confidential session with a specialist who can show you exactly how this strategy can fit into your financial goals. I've been using this strategy since 2019, and the folks that I work with are the ones that I'm going to connect you with. They are the ones that take care of my money, and I do what I'm telling you that you can do. So go to therealjasonduncan.com/bank on yourself, and you can take charge of your financial future today. Now let's get back to the show with Larry. So let's talk about breaking into elite markets. I mean, you've done that. Royal households, fashion week, A-list celebrities, A-list weddings, and all of that, Larry, as you know better than any of us, it requires more than just talent. So what doors, because there's a lot of talented people out there that maybe more so than you haven't broken into that. So what doors did you have to knock on repeatedly, and what finally got them to open?
Well, I think actually it's interesting that you say there are potentially more creative people than I out in that space. I say this a lot when talking to clients. For me, in the space that I work in events, you have a very finite deadline to when something has to be done. And then sometimes, depending on where you're working, you might have a few days to go and build this wonderful city or paradise or all the things. Other things, you might be working in an iconic venue, let's say the Museum of Modern Art in New York or the Natural History Museum in London. You've maybe got 45 minutes to an hour to go and install that design. And so I find that there's two types of business out there. There's one that's incredibly creative, but they haven't necessarily got the logistical grasp to operationally get that in time. They're not thinking about the steps that are necessary or, say, compromising the level of creativity of that design to get it to a place where it's also deliverable. You've then got the other side that does the opposite. Hugely reliable, deliverable, but not necessarily a very creative product. I've tried to become the very best at those two things simultaneously. So you're right. There is somebody out there that is more creative or original than I, but I will take into account the amount of time or the constraints I've got to actually deliver that product and try and put the best possible product together that I can in those conditions. And that's what I've tried to become expert at.
So, but how did you get those doors to finally open? Because a lot of people who are even perhaps more creative aren't trying to knock on those doors, or they don't do it repeatedly enough. Was there one big breakthrough that you thought, you look back now and say, that led to everything that I've become today?
Not at all. There's no one thing. It's a lot of compounding factors. And ultimately, I'd say it's relentless consistency. It's being intentional, but it's being intentional and it's being consistent time and time and time again. And those doors don't swing open. You'll get one little door, cracks open, and then it's up to you to walk through it. It's also where you go back to, for example, looking and saying, well, I am a business, I do sell things. So, for example, I am a salesperson. Let's not beat around the bush. How would you retain that client? You're building trust. With that trust, you get integrity. With consistency, you get even more trust. Then those doors are opened more and more and more. But as a salesperson, I'm used to rejection. I don't allow that to define me. I refuse to accept it. I say, okay, great. And I move on to the next challenge. And I let that to fuel the next piece of desire or the next challenge. The second somebody tells me I can't do something, I go and prove them wrong loudly.
A lot of creative people, especially entrepreneurs, they struggle to charge what they are worth. So how do you position luxury pricing in a way that clients not only accept, but they expect it?
I think realizing that actually the experience that you provide to somebody and the value proposition is based not only on the product itself, but how that product or that business makes you feel. So creating a brand that's no longer just me, myself, and I, but creating a brand that people can align with, using that consistency again and again and again, and ensuring that there's a value proposition that's understood. If we're looking at the top 2%, for example, they can go and have anything that they want. So why would they pick a handbag that costs 100,000 over one that costs 5? What fundamental difference is it? Functionally, they both achieve the same things. Why is that one worth their investment than another? That ultimately comes down to what the brand is offering them, the value proposition that's there, and the trust and integrity that they have to want to come and invest with you. And the more you continue doing that, the more you build something that other people want to be a part of.
What's something that you used to believe that you don't believe anymore?
That actually you can be good at all things, that you could do a little bit of everything. That, for example, when you start, you want to say yes to as many things as humanly possible. Somebody's like, oh, could you help me get this? Yeah, I could do that. Yeah, I could do that. I think one of the best things that I learned to truly hone in on was the concept of staying in your own lane. Goes back to relentless consistency, but staying in your own lane is, for me, what I remind myself on a weekly basis. I sit and have private conversations with myself as I'm like, oh, maybe we should do this now. And I'm like, no, we're not diverting. We're not spurring off onto another little channel and another little path. And especially also because people bring me really nice ideas. Oh, Larry, why don't you do such and such? You're already doing everything else. Why don't you do this? And I'm like, yeah, that's nice. No, stick in your own lane. Because if you stick in your own lane, you become very, very good at the one thing that you do. That's enough.
All right. So the name of this show is The Root of All Success. So I've got to ask you some questions about that. So if you look back over your career as an entrepreneur, what's your one key to success?
I mean, I'd say success for me is a combination of like alignment and independence. So it's trying to align absolutely everything where you have a work-life balance, where you have money to be able to survive, where you have disposable income, where you also can afford to invest in your business. All of those things aren't going to happen overnight. But it is what I would kind of say, when you get to a space that allows you to have commercial balance and a sense of your own time, which for me now, like I've invested so much of myself into this business over the last 11 years, I'm desperately seeking that availability to actually have a life, to be a human person that can have a conversation that isn't about work. So I think trying to find that and getting that sense of alignment is what I would consider success.
Do you consider yourself successful by that definition?
I consider myself to be continually evolving.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've got a few rapid fire questions, 3 actually, to finish the show on today. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. What's your most memorable venue that you ever transformed?
Château de la Croix de Garde in the south of France.
Wow.
Private estate. It is just one of the most beautiful spaces in the world. It's one of the most beautiful buildings, and it's absolutely vast. So the scale that I can work at there is super inspiring.
What's one flower that never fails to impress a client?
Vanda orchids. They live for probably anywhere between like a week to 3 weeks if you look after them. So they're hugely expensive, but especially if it's something you're putting in your house, you get the best return on investment.
And final question, if you could design an event for any person in history, who would it be and what would you create?
As a living person and something I'd love to manifest for 2026, Taylor Swift, please call me.
She's a frequent listener. Maybe she will reach out. Who knows?
Perfect. I do hope so. I've heard that it's all about touch points in business, so I'm just putting them everywhere.
Well, Larry, thank you so much for being here today. Congratulations on your success. How would people reach out to you if they want to talk to Larry about handling an event for them?
Anything you'd like to do, you can either reach out to us on socials at Larry Walshe or via our website, larrywalshe.com.
And that's Walshe, W-A-L-S-H-E. So make sure you put that E on there, larrywalshe.com. Larry, congratulations on all your success. Thank you for being here as a guest on the show today. And maybe now I got a flower guy. I got a guy. I know
you've got somebody. A guy, absolutely. And I come to Nashville.
All right, you know what time it is. It's time for another edition of JD's Public Service Rants. This is where I call out the little things that shouldn't have to be said, but clearly they do. So if you're guilty of this one, well, consider yourself officially put on notice. Today, I'm talking to you, folks who walk around with the Bluetooth speakers like you're the house DJ of every sidewalk, every park, and every beach. Well, look, just because you're feeling your playlist today doesn't mean the rest of us signed up for the live concert experience. You're not setting the vibe. You're hijacking the atmosphere. And it's never peaceful, instrumental, or jazz. It's always some aggressive nonsense that makes dogs bark and old people clutch their hearts. So look, here's the rule. If your music can be heard from more than 5 feet away, you need headphones. Public spaces aren't your personal Coachella stage. Keep the beats in your ears and let the rest of us enjoy the sound of not you. Well, that's it for today's JD's Public Service Rant. Hey, if you got one of these, if you got an idea for one of them, send it over my way. And remember, don't be that guy. Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in today to this show. One of the things that I look back and hear, I remember Larry saying very vividly, is this idea of relentless consistency. And I think that idea of consistency is overlooked so much. I have a a metronome. You know what those are? A metronome is where it keeps the time for music. I have one of those on my desk right past the camera, and it has the word consistency engraved on it. And I gave this as a gift to my clients a few years back. And the story I told them was that it's not the power and the force of the water that carves the canyon in a river, that river. It's the consistent flow of the water that carves the canyon. And so what Larry talked about today, this idea of relentless consistency, is something that you need to take home, Mr. or Mrs. Listener, entrepreneur, whoever you are, wherever you are. Be relentlessly consistent, because that is what's going to make the biggest difference. Thank you again for listening. Tune in again next time when I talk with yet another very successful person about his or her journey to success. Until then, as always, I'm your host, the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Attention business owners. Attention business owners. Feeling burnout from running your business? Uncertain if you're nearing burnout? Take our free 10-question business burnout test at businessburnouttest.com to discover where you stand. With just 10 quick questions, you'll learn how to immediately begin making changes to regain freedom and success. Cut your daily operations time in half. Improve your quality of life and prepare your business for your future exit without losing revenue or profit. Visit businessburnouttest.com now and take the test. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.